Very good morning to all of you. As the chair has said, my name is Subin. I work with the Tricontinental Institute for Social Research, where Vijay Prasad is the director. Uh, he has given the rest of the introductions as far as the institute is concerned. So I'll just read out the papers because Vijay is unable to turn up today. Comrades, first let me apologize for not being amongst you today. I just spent a very long period of time in South Korea and China, giving talks and writing reports. It was a particularly grueling journey, one that seems to have left me flat with bronchitis. I returned to Trivandrum in early January and hope to be able to interact in person then. Subin is kindly reading this text, which I have been working on for some time now. I hope you will find that it stimulates a discussion. Comrades, second, these are difficult times. Next year, the Indian people will go to the polls for another general election. The balance of forces in India is hard to read, but it is certainly the case that the left is not going to be able to seize the initiative from other forces, even as the left has been crucial in the mobilization of agrarian distress into political public action. The elections in Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, and Chhattisgarh in particular show us that while it is the left that raised public consciousness, it was the bourgeois parties that were able to win through the ballot box. Only in Kerala, as a result of the strong chain forged between an active people and a strong and compassionate party, has public action favored the left. Elsewhere, the left is yet too weak to be the beneficiary of a mobilized public. That is why it is not clear what the outcome will be of the general election. Even if Narendra Modi's government is out of office, which would be a boon for India, the tentacles of the right will continue to try and suffocate the Indian imagination. Which is why, on the left, we have to take the long road and ask ourselves difficult questions. We have to ask how we, not only in India but across the world, will be able to galvanize our forces and rise against the age of the strong men. This age of strong men is the time of authoritarianism. The broad smiles of the neoliberals have faded. They had their moment to squeeze society and produce prosperity, and they failed. Their model was always to fail. When the neoliberals squeezed society, wealth traveled upwards to the few and left the many bereft. It was in this condition of difficulty that the strong men appeared. Now, the strong men promised jobs and an end to corruption, but what they actually delivered was social toxicity. It was easier to blame minorities for broad social problems than to actually try and solve them. The strongmen continued the agenda of the neoliberals, but this time without the smile on the face. They promised violence and they delivered violence. These are ugly times. In 1935, the German Marxist playwright Bertolt Brecht wrote a short note on how to understand authoritarianism, whose most dangerous variant is fascism. Brecht was perplexed by the bourgeois liberal attitude towards authoritarianism and fascism. Some people, he wrote, would like to see fascism as being antithetical to capitalism. In other words, they believed that the clarity of capitalism would overwhelm the fog of authoritarianism. Those who are against fascism without being against capitalism, he wrote, are willing to eat the calf, but they are against the sight of blood. They are easily satisfied if the butcher washes his hands before weighing the meat. They are not against property relations which engender barbarism. They are only against barbarism itself. What Brecht means by property relations is the fact that a small minority of the world's population holds the vast mass of social wealth, that is land and labor. This social wealth, not privately held by a few, is used homeopathically to hire human beings and exploit nature, not for any other reason than to make money from money, namely for profit. Concern for humans and nature does not drive the investment of this sequestered money, which in such large amounts is known as capital. This capital stands apart from human life, eager to increase itself at all costs. What drives the few, the capitalists, is to increase their profits, in other words, profitability. That is the essence of the system in which we live. Many people without the means to survive and few people with the means to subordinate the desperate many to the urge of private profit. In cycles, capitalists find that there are no easy and safe investments that would guarantee profits. Now, this crisis of profitability leads to two kinds of strikes. One, a tax strike, where the capitalists use their political power to reduce the tax burden on themselves and increase their wealth. And two, an investment strike, where the capitalists cease investing in the productive sector but instead park their wealth to preserve it. These strikes by the capitalists draw social wealth away from social use and dry up the economic prospects of very large numbers of people. With increases in automation and productivity, capitalists begin to substitute machines for workers or else displace workers by the efficiencies of the production process. In this case, investments are made into machines and into workplace efficiencies, but these have the same impact on society as the investment strike, namely that there are less people employed. The numbers that reflect income and wealth inequality are startling. Bank data shows that 42 individuals have the same wealth as 3.7 billion of the poorest people on the planet, while a mere 8 billionaires have as much wealth as half of the world's people. This is plainly obscene, but it is not accidental. It is premised on the property relations that structure the world and on the mechanisms that the wealthy use to increase their wealth and to deny a higher share of social wealth to the majority of people who produce it. High rates of income and wealth inequality, alongside dampened aspirations for a better life amongst large sections of the population, create a serious crisis of legitimacy for the system. People who work hard but do not see their work rewarded begin to doubt the system, even if they cannot see an exit from the property relations that impoverish them. Mainstream politicians who champion the property relations and who call upon the desperate to become entrepreneurs are no longer seen as credible. It is into this gap that the authoritarian and neo-fascist political forces enter. They belittle the mainstream politicians for their failed projects, but then they do not offer a coherent solution to the escalating crisis either. Instead, the authoritarians and neo-fascists blame the vulnerable for the dampened aspirations of the vast majority. Among these vulnerable are social minorities, migrants, refugees, and anyone who is socially powerless. The fangs of the authoritarians and the neo-fascists are flashed at the weak, who earn the anger of those who have high aspirations, but cannot meet these aspirations in the current arrangement of property relations. The authoritarian and neo-fascist political forces draw on the frustrations of people without offering any reasonable exit from a situation of high inequality and economic turbulence. Now, one theory to explain the problem is that of overproduction. The general tenor of this theory is that the goods being produced cannot be purchased by the mass of people, since these people do not have enough income to buy them. This is a problem of the demand side. If there is a way to increase the money given to the mass of the people, then they can increase consumption and save capitalism from its crisis. The right-wing approach towards this underconsumption problem is to increase the delivery of private credit to people who will then be urged, via advertisements, to live beyond their incomes. They will go into debt, but their consumption, it is hoped, will stimulate the economy out of a crisis. Eventually, these people will not be able to pay off their debts. Their debt will balloon and will create serious social problems. Governments will be forced to borrow to lift their burden, but then use the fact of the borrowing to create further austerity programs against social spending. The delivery of private credit to solve the problem of overproduction typically ends up with social austerity. The example of Europe is glaring. The liberal approach towards this underconsumption problem is for the government to give an economic incentive to the people through tax cuts or through a direct cash transfer scheme. Either way, the government turns over its money to the people and encourages them to buy goods and stimulate the economy. Once more, it is the government that goes into debt to save capitalism. Once more, the debt will balloon and the government will have to go into an austerity program to appease the creditors and the International Monetary Fund. Once more, social austerity will result and it will once more dampen the buying power of the public. The cycle will continue. Either individuals and families or the state go into debt so as to increase aggregate consumption and save capitalism from itself. By this method, capital itself is not asked to sacrifice anything. It is allowed to pursue the strategy of profitability. Capital seeks to increase its profitability by various means, such as substitute machines for people or make people more efficient. This allows firms to hire less people and to take advantage of automation and productivity gains. 2. Transfer factories to areas where wage rates are lower and where regulations of the workplace and of the environment are suppressed. 3. Decrease the tax burden by going on a tax strike. 4. Move capital from investments in production or service into investments in finance and into rent-seeking activities. And 5. Buy up public assets at low costs and monetize them for profit. These strategies allow capitalists to increase their wealth, but at the same time impoverish other people and society. People are asked to be patriotic. Capital is only asked to be profitable. Challenges. For the left, this situation poses serious challenges. The first set of challenges is to find a way to organize people who find their society shattered and their expectations confounded. The second set of challenges include how to find a policy exit from this system and its limitations. What are the challenges before us to organize the people against the intractable system? Here are 5, although there are many more. 1. Aspirations. Over the course of the past 5 decades, the capitalist media and the advertising industry have created a set of aspirations that have broken the culture of the working class and peasantry, as well as the traditional cultural worlds of the past. Young people now expect more from life, which is to the good, but these expectations are less social and more individual, with the individual hopes often attached to commodities of one kind or another. To be free is to buy is to be alive. That is the motto of the capitalist system. But those who cannot afford to buy and who go into debt for their aspirations are also constantly disappointed. It is this disappointment that the authoritarians and neo-fascists channel towards hatred. Can the left movement channel this disappointment into productive hope? 2. Atomization. State cuts of social services, the increased privatization of social life, and the astronomical increase of interaction with the digital world has increased atomization of human interaction. Where people had previously exchanged ideas and goods, helped each other, and inspired each other, now there are less and less avenues for such face-to-face society. The fragmentation of society and the exhaustion of people to find survival has made it harder for the left to bring people together to create social change. Television and social media now dominate the world of communication. These are venues that are owned by monopoly capitalist firms. The left has always relied upon institutions of society to be its transmitters. As these social linkages fragment, the left dissolves. Can the left movement help rebuild these institutions and processes? The society that is our basis? 3. Outsider. The authoritarian sections and neo-fascists point their fingers at the outsider, the social minorities, migrants, refugees, and anyone who is socially powerless. It is against these people that the far right is able to build its strength. There can be no left resurgence without a firm and complete defense of the outsider, a total rejection of the fascistic ideas of hatred and bigotry that saturate society. It is harder to build a politics of love than a politics of hate. Can the left movement develop a politics of love that attracts masses of people? 4. Confidence. Politics of the people is rooted in confidence. If the people do not feel confident in their activity to either reform or to change the system, then they will not be active. Waves of unrest often leads to increased confidence, but even here, the point of emphasis is not the last person to join a protest, but the first few people who built the network to build the protest. Social decay leads to a lack of confidence to make political change, particularly when the aspirational society suggests that the only necessary change is for everyone to become entrepreneurial. Can the left produce the sensibility that a future is possible and to engender confidence amongst people to fight to build that future? 5. Democracy without democracy. In societies where there is no democracy, this problem is not immediate. In such places, the immediate task is to win the fullest democracy. In those societies where democracy is the main form, the oligarchy and imperialism have used many methods to undermine democracy, to dominate society without suspending democracy. The methods used are sophisticated, including to delegitimize the institutions of the state, to disparage elections, to use money to corrupt the electoral process, to use social media and advertising to destroy opposition candidates, and to utilize the least democratic institutions in a democracy, such as an unelected judiciary, to erode the power of elected officials. Can the left defend the idea of democracy from this attrition without allowing democracy to come to mean merely elections and the electoral system? Our research institute, Tricontinental Institute for Social Research, is going to conduct investigations along these 5 lines. Once you have organized people to push for a new world system, what is the policy framework that needs to be adopted? It is here that intellectuals must put their heart and soul into action. We need to think hard about the many ways to create creative ways to use our social wealth to solve the immediate problems of humanity: hunger, sickness, climate catastrophe. We need to find ways to uproot the basis of wars. We need to use our creativity to reconstruct the productive sector around forms such as cooperatives. We need to use the social wealth to enrich ourselves culturally, making more physical places for us to interact, to produce culture and art. We need to use our social wealth to produce societies that do not force people to work to survive, but that subordinate work to human ingenuity and passion. It is cruel to think that these hopes as naive. It tells us a lot that it is easier to imagine the end of the earth than to imagine the end of capitalism, to imagine the polar ice cap flooding us into extinction than to imagine a world where our productive capacity enriches all of us. Thank you so much.